Vladimir Putin spent months promising the world that he had created something no Western country would ever be able to stop. A missile that flew 10 times faster than sound that could penetrate any defense. And on the night of May 23rd into the 24th, he used this weapon against Ukraine for the third time since the beginning of the war. The result? $50 million spent to destroy a set of garages in Bila Tserkva. But what almost no one is talking about is that on that same night, Russia launched a second Oreshnik. And about this one, well, they didn't confirm anything, they didn't explain anything, and they remained completely silent. And do you know why they did that? Because what happened with this second missile exposes a weakness that Putin doesn't want anyone to see. To understand the magnitude of what happened, you need to know what Putin promised, and when he introduced Oreshnik to the world back in November 2024. Russia launched Oreshnik for the first time against Dnipro in Ukraine. Soon after, Putin went on television to explain what that meant. He said it was impossible to intercept, that it flew at more than 10 times the speed of sound, that it destroyed underground bunkers and everything above ground. And then he went further. He publicly challenged the West. He said that the countries of the Western military alliance could choose a target in Kyiv, put all available air defenses there, and he would fire the Oreshnik. Let's see what happens, said Putin.
We are ready for such an experiment.
It was a huge gamble and a very specific promise. But there's one detail that almost no one mentions. The United States Department of Defense itself classified Oreshnik as experimental. In other words, it's not a finished weapon, it's a prototype being tested in real combat. It's like bringing a car to market without doing safety tests and claiming it's the best in the world. And once you understand that, everything will make more sense. Because in the first two uses, Oreshnik was launched without an explosive warhead, without a bomb. Just metal blocks that destroy through the force of impact at high speed without exploding, only by the force of the collision. And in both cases, the damage was minimal. There was no sign of the promised devastating effects. That night, the narrative of the invincible weapon was already starting to crack. But Russia insisted. And then came the third launch. In the early hours of May 24, 2026, Russia carried out one of the biggest attacks of the year. 600 drones and 90 missiles were launched at Kyiv and other regions. And amid all that weaponry was the star of the show, the Oreshnik, launched against Bila Tserkva, a city of 200,000 inhabitants, about 80 kilometers from the Ukrainian capital. The missile arrived, the blocks separated in the air as expected, and hit a group of garages. No, it wasn't a military headquarters, it wasn't a weapons factory, it wasn't a power plant, just garages. The craters were about 3 meters in diameter and 2 meters deep. Residents of Bila Tserkva came out of the shelters and found holes small enough to fit inside a room. This was the result of the weapon that Putin said would change the war. Researchers from Defense Express calculated that the total effect of the Oreshnik was practically equivalent to 36 Shahed drones with reinforced warheads. Now, consider that the Shahed is a cheap Iranian drone that Russia uses in large numbers. That says everything about the Russian defense industry. It depends on Iranian technology for the dirty work, while spending fortunes on prototypes that barely work. An Oreshnik, for example, costs $50 million. For that price, they could buy hundreds of drones. Even the Russians themselves realized it. Ultra-nationalist groups on social media exploded with criticism. One of them wrote, "Once again, empty warheads, useless special effects. No bridge destroyed, no dam, no real target." It wasn't Western analysts saying that. It was the Russians themselves who support the war. The weapon that Putin used to intimidate all of Europe didn't even impress those who root for it. But that wasn't the biggest problem of the night. Because while the world was debating the attack on the garages, something much more revealing was happening in silence. And the question that no one asked was simple. Why did Russia remain completely silent about what came next? Open-source intelligence sources identified signs of a second Oreshnik launched on the same night, fired hours after the first one. But Russia never confirmed this one. Total silence. What the videos and analyses suggest is that this second Oreshnik failed in flight and crashed within Russian-occupied territory in the Donetsk region near the cities of Avdiivka and Yasenovata under Russian control. While the world was still looking at the photos of the garages, pieces of the Russian missile itself were falling on Russian positions, without the Russian government saying a word. Some analyses do not rule out that it may have hit Russian forces themselves. The Institute for the Study of War, one of the most respected military analysis organizations in the world, confirmed this interpretation. If the second launch is confirmed, 1 out of every 4 Oreshniks used in the war has failed. 25% failure rate for a missile that Putin presented as the most advanced weapon on the planet. Do you know what's even worse about this? The best explanation for why it fails is the simplest of all. The missile failed because it was poorly made. Meanwhile, the silence from the Russian government says a lot. It's almost as if they're confirming it. When it works, they announce it loudly. When it fails, they hide it. They stay silent. And the effects of this go beyond tonight. Look, Russia produces about 5 Oreshniks per year. 1 every 2 months. It's an extremely rare weapon, absurdly expensive, used to cause fear. The effect it seeks isn't destruction, it's psychological. But that effect depends on one thing. The belief that the missile is, in fact, what Putin says it is. But now that belief is falling apart. In all 3 uses, the pattern was the same. Huge promise, poor result. And now we have a failure that Russia is trying to hide. And this has real consequences, because its allies are watching, its adversaries are too. Every time an invincible weapon delivers less than it promised, Russia's credibility shrinks. Countries that rely on Russian military power to feel protected are seeing firsthand what that power is really worth in practice. Remember that challenge that Putin made to the West? Choose a target in Kiev. Let's see what happens. The West didn't need to respond. Oreshnik responded on its own. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you think Russia will continue using Oreshnik as a tool of intimidation, even with these results? Leave it in the comments. If this content helped you understand what's going on, share it with someone who is also following the war. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. We will keep an eye on everything happening in Ukraine. See you next time.